Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mellissa Thomas of Florida National News coming to you with the FNN Politics and Power series for your Thursday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today's a bit of an exciting show for us here at Florida National News. We've actually got a familiar friend, Randy Ross, who we've not only interviewed, but has been a contributor with the Florida National News team for a while. But he is currently running for Republican State Committeeman. So we definitely want to get his thoughts on basically want to educate you guys on what that role entails and get his take on the state of the Republican Party as he sees it, the state of the nation as he sees it. And since he is a big Trump supporter, we do want to get his take on the campaign, especially now post-quarantine and with, the cases starting to go back up, just kind of get his thoughts on things. But if you're someone who is unfamiliar with Randy Ross, if you've never met him, I don't know how you haven't. This is a gentleman who's very involved in the community. He's a big community organizer and has been for many years, not only political events, but also different social events as well in terms of activism and things like that. He was highly instrumental in the launch of Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, which is, of course, a charity walk that benefits Harbor House, which works with battered women, victims of domestic violence, among other things. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring Randy Ross on. Randy, thank you so much for taking the time, man.
Hey, Mellissa, how are you?
Doing good, doing
good.
good.
Even if we have to be at a distance, it's good to see you.
Absolutely. And I noticed recently you were actually kind of in a bit of a relaxation. You decided to kind of take a bit of a breather. So kind of talk about how you've been with that, and especially with the pandemic and being safely removed from everybody. Just kind of talk about that a little bit.
Well, I take care of my mom. She's 76. So I had to be somewhat considerate of, actually very considerate of going out in public and then possibly bringing something, home to the house. And we've been very fortunate that her health and, we've not been impacted the way a lot of families have throughout the situation. I am clearly not a big proponent of wearing the mask because I don't like the idea of being told to do that. However, today I literally was almost running late for this because we were at a neurology appointment with my mom, and I put on the mask. And when I took her to a rheumatologist and her general practitioner, those were practices that I appreciate and observe because you're going to be around seniors, people that are more susceptible to getting the virus. I don't look very pretty in one of them, but I did put it on because it was required. But, I tend to stay home a lot, because I can work from home, and I do walk the dog a lot. I think my dog, I walk him about 6 times a day, it seems.
He keeps you young.
Something to get me out of the house, So I think the most exposure I probably ever get is going to the grocery store, I would imagine. But yeah, It's been it's interesting perspective. I might as well tell you what my 2 cents are regarding how the president has handled it, how our governor is handling it. My mom's doctors have educated me greatly on what the mask can and cannot do. That's kind of where my no mask process is coming from. I'm listening to Harvard educated, Yale educated doctors that are saying, Randy, unless you've got the is it N92 or N95? I can't remember the exact
N95.
N95 mask on, you're really not very well protected. And so what I tended to do is find spaces where I don't have to be around other people. I have gone down the wrong aisle at Publix a few times, and I've gotten some shady eye from that, but that's just about a pure accident. It's not like I'm trying to actually do anything to hurt anyone, but this is a very interesting time for America. I think the president and our governor are doing the best under circumstances that they have. One of the things I feel the media might be not paying attention to is how many people are actually dying from this virus versus how many are contracting it. Certainly, it's like anything else. I mean, the more people die from the flu than they die from the COVID virus. But at the same time, I understand in some ways, I believe there's a political desire to keep panic and fear going in our communities right now. So for me, I just tend to focus on what I can do personally to not try to infect other people, but at the same time recognize that I have the freedom to not choose to wear a mask, and unless, like I said, I'm going to my mom's doctor's appointment, I won't wear a mask.
Gotcha. And thanks for sharing that. Thanks for molding that all together. I love that. I love our interviews, when they mash 2 or 3 questions in one. It's great.
Well, it was funny because you interviewed me almost a year ago to this day.
Wow.
Lake Eola when I had my dog with me, and how things popped up in the Facebook memories. And so it wasn't that long ago. I just had to make sure I didn't wear the same shirt that I wore a year ago.
Well coordinated. You're good. You're good. Absolutely. So, talk a little bit about, before we go to the commercial break, talk a little bit about you recently filed to run for state, Republican State
Orange
Committeeman.
County State
Does that,
Committeeman. Okay.
yeah.
Here's what I learned. And this is me being honest with you. When I became the chairman of the Trump campaign in 2016, I wasn't even a member of the Orange County Republican Executive Committee. I was a Republican, but I had not joined. And they were like, okay, now you've got to join. And what I realized is that I was part of a group, amazing people, but really still caught 20 years ago. They weren't really ready for this president. And I think the reason that they kind of embraced my role was because many of them didn't think Trump had a chance of winning. What we would learn, of course, is that we would not only win the presidential preference primary under my leadership in Orange County, but we would, of course, with 1,200 plus volunteers, lead our way through a general election where, of course, in Orange County, we cannot win, in general, because there's 150,000 more Democrats, even more MPAs than we have Republicans. So I realized that on the inside, I was not necessarily getting the type of traction to make the changes in the Republican Party locally that I felt were important. And those include inclusion. Those include making sure that we support our president. So what I decided to do was leave the Republican Executive Committee right at a year ago, focus on fundraising for the president, which I've raised lots of money for the president and lots of money for other candidates in Orange County, but also at the same time, really focusing on traveling to rallies, trying to figure out what the temperature was of the country, and then reporting that back as to the best of my abilities. And so when I had known for a long time I was going to run for Orange County Republican State Committeeman. The interesting part about it is I'm running against someone that's held political office since the time he was roughly 26 or 27 years old. And I think that, to me, is one of the challenges that we face with the Republican Party, is that we've got a lot of folks that once they're in there are people afraid to run against them, people that are afraid to challenge their ideals. Listen, I'm not totally pleased always with the Republican Party. I am one of the first people and outwardly spoken about that. But here's the interesting point. I brought up yesterday or the day before that there is no Republican in Orange County running for sheriff. There is no Republican in Orange County running for property appraiser. There's no Republican in Orange County running for clerk of courts. There's no Republican running for supervisor of elections. And I could go on and on and on, because most Republicans recognize that they can't win in a county unless they either have a personality, somebody knows them, who knows how they get acknowledged. And so as a result, we just simply have not been putting people up. One of the things people need to understand about what the Republican State Committeeman and Committeewoman's roles are very undefined. Every county, all 67 counties in the state of Florida, and I believe it's the same way on the Democrat side, but they all have a committeeman and a committeewoman. There is no formal job description. So what happens is often folks are put into those roles. They have 4 meetings they must attend a year. Those are the quarterly meetings for the Republican Party. And they also vote on who the party leadership will be for the state of Florida. So that's the mini description, but what else is supposed to be happening? So from my perspective, what I felt should be happening is that we should be putting together a bench of candidates, even if they're going to run in a race, let's say they can't win. Let's say sheriff is a perfect example, or even property appraiser, who knows what they are. So that we can start building a bench. So when positions become available, whether that means that there's a state house position or a state senate position, the folks have actually created some name ID so they can be out there and start becoming relatable to donors as well as constituents. That didn't happen this cycle, and that's under the current state committeeman that's running for re-election. That, to me, is inexcusable. I also believe that politics is an additions game. What I've noticed in the last 5 years, specifically since I've been involved more heavily with local Republican politics, is it's kind of this Tanya Harding politics game. I came out of nowhere. As I mentioned to you, they didn't really want me to organize in Orange County for Trump. And I think that alone sent the message to me that what was it about this president that was so scary to so many people? Listen, there are times he'll tweet something and I'm like, okay, how am I going to deal with that one today? Or there's times where something will occur where I know that's going to be a little bit more complicated. But I'm the only Republican in Orange County that led us across the finish line in 2016. I've built my database from 1,200 names in Central Florida, over 25,000. I know how to fundraise, and that's really one of the most important things for someone running for politics to do. So when I start putting all that experience into my Trump 2020 cup,
Wow.
I realize I even have a coffee cup.
Wow.
When I start putting that all in there, I realize that what we really need right now is change. Have we been as inclusive with the African American, Hispanic, and Asian communities as we need to be? The answer is no. We can do better. And that's partially why I think I'm the right candidate for this role at this time, because that would be my job, is to make sure that we start figuring out how do we do a better job of letting everybody know that the Republican Party really is the party for everybody. I start listening to some of my friends that are in the Hispanic community, and they talk about conservatism, and they talk about faith, and they talk about, pro-life, and some of the issues that are very much at the core of the Republican Party, yet we still have not figured out a way to bring them into the process. And part of that means that instead of having, I think there's nearly 1,300 precinct committee man and committee women positions in Orange County. We have roughly 75, 80 of those filled. Why is that? Why does the party not try harder to get more and more people? I have learned that back in the late 80s and 90s, there used to be 300 or 400 people that showed up to an OCREC meeting. Today, you're lucky if they make quorum. And if you've only got 75 or 80 members, that sends a message. Many people have gone to a meeting. I know many people of color. I know many people of different cultural backgrounds that have gone to meetings, and they go to one meeting and they never come back. And why is that? Do we not, churches are wonderful examples of why people continue to go to a church. And I say this to folks all the time. Normally when you go to church, there's a minister or pastor that meets you at the door, either when you go in or when you're on your way out, because they want you to know you are welcome. They want you to know that you're appreciated. That's not how it is when you go to our Orange County Republican Executive Committee meeting. So hopefully on this outside role, looking into the organization, we could make the changes that I feel are necessary. Listen, if half the people in OCREC, because assume that I would win, if half of the people left, I'm not sure that's a bad thing, because what they're doing, you got to remember, they tried desperately to get me kicked out of the party because I went to a friend of mine's, that Democrats, election night celebration in a nonpartisan race. That doesn't make any sense to me. I live in a town that is ran by Democrats. As a Republican, I have to learn to work with them. Everybody from the mayor to the sheriff. I tell people all the time that that's important. That doesn't mean I agree with all their politics. I got to figure out a way to work with them. And so whether it was Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, whether I was working with Title I schools back in the 90s, AIDS Walk Orlando, I've always tried to figure out a way to not just be right here in the middle, to surpass all expectations, because really that's how you really make change in a community. So my decision to run was made probably a year or so ago, but I wasn't ready to announce it, of course, until just recently during qualifying. And I think that I'll take my chances. If what the Republicans in Orange County want is nobody running for any constitutional offices, no Republicans really having a chance, and I look at the CD7 race, I look at CD9 and 10, those are going to be very difficult races for Republicans to even have a showing in. If that's what everybody still wants, they should vote for my opponent. If they want change and they're tired of being sick and tired of looking around and saying, we're not doing any better, that's why I'm the candidate to make those changes, because and you and I both know this, I'm not a quiet mouthpiece. I didn't become the chairman to put myself under this odd microscope that it's not been easy. I've had my life threatened, my family's life threatened, jobs, sponsors, I could go on and on and on, because so many people just didn't understand why I supported this president. I support this president today probably more than I did when I was running his campaign back in 2016. And I can tell you part of that is that I look at the fight that he has to put on all the time. It's such an intenseness that comes from his haters. And some of those folks, for the record, are on the Republican side, which drives me crazy to try to comprehend. I also understand that there are many people that don't really like the fact that an openly gay conservative got Trump across the finish line in Orange County. So that I say, get over it. I don't run around with a rainbow flag. I'm not sitting there trying to change OCREC into being an all gay, organization, which are some of the ridiculous rumors that I've heard. What I'm trying to do is make sure we get this president across the finish line again, and more importantly, start reinventing the way the party is organized at a local level. If that does not change, we'll never get these numbers in a way that Republicans even have a chance. And listen, throughout the country and metropolitan cities, they do tend to skew liberal. They do tend to skew Democrat. But that doesn't mean that Republicans can't find a way to get Democrats to want to vote for them. It doesn't mean that you can't find a way to get probably the most important group, which are no party affiliation voters, to side with you coming into these upcoming elections. And that's really, I think, in a nutshell, why I decided to make this decision. And, August 18th, it's one way or the other, because there's only two people in the race. So it's not like there's going to go into the general election. If I had any, hope, it would be that people remember the work that we've done for the last 4 or 5 years, and that they recognize that maybe the party, after 20 years, you got to remember, in I think it was 1998, there were only 800 no party affiliation voters in Orange County. The Republican Party was the largest party, followed by Democrats. Somebody did something right over the last 20 years, and it wasn't Republicans in Orange County. We are now third in line behind Democrats and independents. And I would say the reason the independents are so large is they really haven't found a comfort level with either party. Right. And I think it's one of the reasons they sit in the middle. They do tend to often skew and vote conservatively. But I think it's one of the reasons that they sit back and say, you know what, I don't really believe in what the Republican Party is doing sometimes. I don't really like what the Democratic Party is doing. I'm going to sit right here in the middle. And I think that's where we can do better. We can do better to get some of those folks to understand, with new leadership, with a change in leadership, with a shaking up of the Orange County Republican Executive Committee that absolutely must occur. That's how we change the party locally. And that's just my opinion.
All right, that was a mouthful. So we definitely want to. That was a lot. So we're going to take a quick commercial break, guys, and delve a little bit deeper into, Randy, your views on, where the country's going right now, and even a little bit more detail into some of the nuances of the how. You've laid out what needs to change, but then we want to get into a conversation on your ideas of how the party can start to draw in more NPAs and things like that. So we will be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Don't go anywhere. This is a quick commercial break.
I'm not picking it up. You pick it up.
I'm not picking it up.
Well, somebody's got to pick it up.
I'll pick it up. They're clean. 'Cause my hand is clean. Oh yeah, I'm Charmin clean. That's how I know they're clean.
Charmin Ultra Strong is woven like a washcloth and just cleans better.
Yeah, I'm Charmin clean.
The kid does have a point.
My hand is clean. Yeah.
Enjoy the go with Charmin. And for an extra clean finish, try Charmin Flushable Wipes.
All right, guys, we are back with Randy Ross. So yeah, Randy, let's get it.
By the way,
That's your favorite commercial. It is so adorable. Yeah, so let's get into some of the nuance of what you propose as the how, in terms of providing more inclusivity into the local Republican Party. Like, what do you feel are ways that the party can start to become a little more inviting and more inclusive?
Again, I'm speaking specifically to Orange County.
Right.
I first meeting I went to was in December of 2015 to the Orange County Republican Executive Committee. I didn't see, by the time I left last year, very few change, not only just the membership, but in the cultural makeup. It was not reflective, whether it was Blacks, Hispanics, Asians, it was not reflective of this community as it is now. So while I don't believe in pandering, I'm not a big fan of identity politics. You do have to have a board, and you have to have a group of members that people, when they walk in, feel comfortable saying hi to, that they are embraced, that they are encouraged, that you want to come back every month. Who wants to go to a meeting monthly where you walk in and, half the room likes you and half the room doesn't like you? And, one of the challenges, of course, with that is the fact that that's kind of the way it is with our president. You know, half the people love him and half of the people aren't happy with him. But in an environment like the Orange County Republican Executive Committee, the state committeeman, I believe, can set the tone, along with the committee woman for that matter, not only locally, but at a state level, that Orange County is going to be viewed and looked at differently. And part of that is going out into the community and recruiting people to be part of the membership. I have been to meetings before where I have brought in lots of guests, and those folks conveniently cannot join because there just happens to not be anybody there that brought the paperwork for them to join, or there's no notary present. Those are convenient opportunities to keep the membership at a small scale. If there are 1,300 or so precinct committee man and precinct committee women positions, we have to go out into the community and recruit people to run those roles. And what the precinct committee man and precinct committee woman do in their community is basically on election day or leading into election day, they let everybody know who the Republican candidates are. Chloe, my dog's getting ready to cry. That's what their role is. So if we've only got 75 or so in a county like this with 1.3 million people, that's not a lot of people. Okay, that's not going to be a lot. So you got to cast a much wider net. I believe that this isn't, to me, it's not a fight between Democrats and Republicans that I often see played out. If your platform is strong, if your ideals and what you believe are solid, people will gravitate to that. One of the things there's a reason why my email list went from 1,200 in 2016 to 25,000. And it's not just because of this fake tan that's got me looking like I've got suntan. I got my suntan glasses on. It's because they believe in something. You know, one of the things I try to do, and I've done it since I moved to Orlando in 1993, working with Title I schools up until now, is I love being a cheerleader. You know, I don't know that I'm the best strategist. I rely on other people to help me sometimes with strategy. But I do understand how people thrive when they believe someone else believes in something so much. So throughout all the different programs I've ever done, living in this town now for 27 years, which is hard to believe when I think about it, is I try to induce them with enthusiasm. That has to happen in the Orange County Republican Executive Committee and with all Republicans in Orange County. We were able to do that on the Trump campaign. And I think that is what I was so surprised at with Okrek not trying to take all that energy and motivation that we had in 2016 and just blend it into the process towards the 2020 election. It was kind of the opposite. Once we got him elected, what I noticed was at a local level, they wanted to push all of us to the side, and kind of bring back the establishment leadership as we go into 2020. And what a lot of people don't understand, and this is important, I think, to understand as well, is that traditionally in a re-election campaign, it's not like when Trump won in 2016. He funded, as you know, up until July or so when he got the number of delegates and got the nomination, he funded his own campaign. That means he paid people to work and do all these things. On a re-election campaign, at least traditionally, the RECs in all 67 markets throughout and counties throughout the state of Florida, they take over. Here's why this is a problem. When you throw it back to the B team that didn't even want him to win in 2016, and I do call them the B team because in many ways they are not the A team that got us across the finish line. When you throw it back to the B team, it's going to be up to the A team to go outside of that sphere and still figure out a way to get him reelected in 2020. And I think that is something that should never have happened. Strong leadership would have put all personalities aside and said, we need to do exactly what we're doing. And you and I've talked so many times before. You've seen the things that I've written about for FNN. I mean, the reality is I never gave up in this whole, I drive a Trump truck. I've got a dog named Trumpy, and I do that some ways because I know that people have got to continue to be inspired or we cannot get over this finish line again. The amount of hurdles that we're watching, even today, the president's tax returns now becoming somewhat available potentially for people to look at. We were at the lowest unemployment that we had ever had up until this virus. And this virus is obviously destroying the local economy here in Orange County. All these things are worrisome to me because I did my internship at Disney in 1987. I came here moved back here because I believe so much in this town. And I've watched friend after friend have to either move home, move out of their apartments and go live with other folks. Right. At some point, Mellissa, and I know it's kind of hard for us because sounds like I'm saying is go get infected as we open the communities back up. That's not what I really mean. What I really mean is we've got to at some point, as Steve Harvey says, jump. We have to at some point jump, and we do that safely. I'm watching the debates that are going on right now regarding kids going back to school.
I was going to ask you about that.
I was with someone yesterday who is a parent because, I helped raise a child for 5 years, but I'm obviously not a parent. And I said, how would you feel about your children going back to school? And I was surprised that the mom was so quick to say they need to go back to school. But the problem with going back to school is think about when you go to Publix, think about when you go anywhere, there's these dividers that keep you from being able to breathe on each other. People have masks on. How do you get a first grader or a second grader? I mean, I was ornery when I was at that age. How do you get them to wear their mask all day? What will be the protocol? What will be the plan? The only thing I could suggest is that I put a lot of faith in parents that they've been homeschooling, many of them already, but they need to go back. They want to go back to work too. They need to go back to work. We can't live off these stimulus packages forever. Eventually that's going to go away. And for the record, I do believe the country probably needs one more before we get back into that process. And from what I'm hearing, I believe the president and Senate and Congress hopefully is working towards that because, 3 months is of nothing. To jump back into something is just not that easy. But I do believe that kids should go back to school. I just don't know what that looks like. I'm trying to imagine myself in that environment. You got to remember, one of the things I did for 5 or 6 years was work with Title I schools on health and wellness programs. And so to think about trying to keep, I mean, these were 4th and 5th graders, and I was having a really difficult time just always keeping them in line, and I applaud teachers because I don't know how they do it,
That's a calling. They have to want to do it.
It's like being a doctor or a nurse and putting yourself on the line, or a police officer.
Right.
I'm not that kind of person that would really understand how to do that. And I get it. I put up a poll recently a couple of days ago, and I saw how people were reacting. Most people agree kids should go back to school. One of the pushbacks I was seeing was from teachers. And I think that teachers are afraid. They don't, and we often ask teachers to teach, reading, writing, and arithmetic, but we also ask them to be disciplinarians. We also ask them to, kind of deal with so many other issues that teachers, I don't think, really should have to be dealing with in the classroom. And now we're adding yet this other thing to their plate. I did watch the press conference recently, a couple of days ago with our superintendent in Orange County Public Safety. They've got their work cut out for them. But the bottom line is I do support that kids should be going back to school. And I think that the idea that we think they're going to all wear a mask is just probably not going to fly. I just don't see. They may have them around their neck, but can you imagine trying to navigate that as a principal, assistant principal, teacher in a school? I think it's going to be very difficult. The good news is that we know while some youth have been starting to be far more affected by this, we know that traditionally kids are a little bit more, resilient, and they don't tend to have the same type of challenges, let's say, that a senior citizen does.
Very true. Very true. I mean, it's an additional responsibility for the administrators, because they're now going to have to enforce that, please keep it on. And I mean, the recent updates that are coming out of Osceola and Orange County were basically in the areas where they have to transit to and from class, or areas where social distancing isn't possible. That's when they have to put them on, or on their buses, I think. But it's going to be another point of enforcement.
Buses haven't really even been talked about. Think about it. Now the bus driver, I'm assuming, has to disinfect their bus every day. At the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, I mean, we are, the good news is that maybe less kids will get sick, because we know kids always have, stuffy noses or sniffling noses.
Carriers.
And the funny part is that the kids that I know that are at those age groups, the younger age groups, they all want to hug each other and they want to hold hands and they want to do all these things. And so now what we're saying to them is, can't do any of that. I just think that's a very dangerous space to go. We have enough challenges in our country right now when it comes to cultural relationships, race relationships. The last thing we need to be teaching kids is you can't embrace each other, that you can't talk to each other, in an intimate way where you're close. And, I just, I don't know exactly what the solutions are. I do trust in the science. Don't get me wrong. I do. And I hear it. The flip side of it is I also believe it's become extremely politically driven. And that's concerning to me.
Gotcha. That's actually the perfect pause for one more commercial break. And when we come back, we're actually gonna talk a little bit more about what you were mentioning before about your ability to work across party lines, because that's very important. And I think viewers need to hear that, given the current social climate in the country. It's very divided. So we're gonna come back and talk a little bit more about that, and then get into one of your favorite topics, which is the Trump campaign as it stands right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We'll be right back.
At Duke Energy, we deliver electricity and so much more, like free home energy assessments, rebates for energy-saving improvements, payment options to help you better manage your budget, and even bill credits for helping the community use less energy. So no matter what you're doing, we can help you make better energy choices every day. It's just another way we bring power to your life. How much can you save?
All right, guys, we are back with Randy Ross. So yeah, talk a little bit more about how you navigate working across party lines, given that Orange County is primarily Democrat, and how do you persuade folks that do kind of ride, maybe they're super hard right and don't want to work with anyone on the left? Like, how do you normally work to get things done when you have a project or an initiative in a city where, the majority of the folks are of a different party affiliation?
That's a great question, Mellissa. One of the things that, from the very time remember when I moved here, I was a registered Republican in 1993. I switched to the Democratic Party in 2002, primarily because when I came out, I thought, okay, this is the party that cares most about LGBT issues, and I need to be part of that. I quickly realized I was pretty much being used, in my opinion, as a pawn in that process, because I didn't really, at the time, think the Republican Party was really paying attention to how normal gay people are. They were really trying to put us in this little box. And I decided when I came back to the party in 2014 that I was going to make it a personal goal to make sure that people understand that gay people aren't strange. They're not weird. There's of course some, but there's also straight people that are like that too. What I wanted people to understand was that in this town, I've had no choice. When I launched Walk a Mile in Her Shoes and got Mayor Dyer, property appraiser Rick Singh, County Commissioner Pete Clark at the time, different elected officials, almost all of them walking in heels. That wasn't because I wanted to show men walking in heels. I wanted to bring awareness and attention to the issue of domestic abuse in this town and raise money. And we came out right out of the box and we were able to accomplish that. So I had no choice. I didn't try to, beat my chest regarding politics. I really wanted to focus on the issues. And I think that one of the strangest things and one of the more difficult problems that we have is we put people in the Democrat box and the Republican box, when in fact, we all live in the middle. If you want your life in the middle, you want to be able to pay your bills, you want safety. It's no secret that I've not been incredibly pleased with all of the protests that have occurred in our town specifically, because I don't like watching all the damage done. When I worked at the Orlando Museum of Art on a one-year contract, we were part of watching how Sea Art Orlando was coming together. And when I found out that some of that art, hundreds of thousands of dollars of art that was put, I think it was over $1 million, the whole installation process, that some people had vandalized it and put up, profanities and, defund the police and all of this stuff. It was greatly concerning to me because it was no longer, I believed, it wasn't just about race anymore. It was about this organized chaos to destroy. I didn't feel comfortable with it. to this day, I don't remember the last time in the last 4 months that I've walked around Lake Eola. It's no secret that I'm an openly, a Trump supporter. I've heard that my picture is on flyers sometimes at some of these events. So if I show up, they think I'm going to try to disrupt it. That couldn't be further from the truth. I'm not even a big fan of protest on either side of the fence. And so it's been a very interesting learning for me. I have spent a lot of time in the last couple of months listening since the Mr. Floyd incident, because I was often reminded, Randy, you're white. Randy, you don't understand. But I need to be part of the conversation. And that doesn't mean I have to learn how to, Mellissa, I'll be honest, I didn't realize that our country, and I still don't believe that totally, but I think in certain markets it is, but I certainly didn't believe that we were that divided. Maybe, one time somebody said something to me, and I'm not going to say who it was, but she is a former Miss America, and she said, Randy, you'll never
You gave it
know.
away. You gave it away.
She said, Randy, I'll never know what it's like to be gay, and you'll never know what it's like to be Black. How then am I supposed to be part of the learning? How am I supposed to be part of helping educate people around me if I can't be part of understanding, the issues that really exist? And it's been a frustration point for me, because I don't agree with the vandalism. I don't agree with the looting and the destruction of property. It to me is just so backwards of how we move forward. But I'm learning more that I've got to be a little more understanding that, like she said, I'll never know what it's like to be Black. The flip side of that is I also am an American, and I believe that we all bleed one color. And at some point, we've got to do a better job of just respecting each other a little bit more. I didn't think that our city, and I'm talking about Orlando, would ever see what I've seen here. The other day I was driving the Trump truck on a way back from a funeral from Cape Canaveral, and I had to come down Mills Avenue to get back to where I live, not even thinking that I was coming right parallel to the protest. And I had to get a police escort to get out of a space that day. One day I was going to the radio show, going down Roslyn, not even thinking there's a protest going on at City Hall. And I rolled my window down and I said to the Orlando Police Department officer, I said, I need to get to I-4. And he told me I was going the right way. And I said, no, I need to get to I-4 in this. And they, of course, helped me to get past that space, because I've watched and I've seen. I can't even imagine if my mom and I, because, sometimes she's with me, and I can't imagine if we were in a position where people were just so angry and they saw this target, what that would mean to our safety. And so I feel like the country is in a strange divide. I will say to you, if they want to blame Trump, I think they're blaming the wrong person. I look back in my life, I remember growing up in the 70s. I'll be 55, but Mellissa, look.
You don't look it.
You don't look it. I'm just kidding. But, I remember it. And I remember people in my family, because my mom comes from a very large family that originally was from Arkansas. I remember them using the N-word here and there. And then I remember my parents distinctly reminding us, you can never say that word. You can never, you got to do this. You got to do this. You got to look at things differently. So my parents reinvented what back then I was hearing. And from that point forward, I never really, I guess, paid more attention to it, because I had been taught, and this is what I believe, I hope more parents are doing this. I'd been taught you don't treat Black people, Hispanic people, Asian people differently. And if you do, you're part of the problem. So I think that's where we are in this country right now. Do I think, and I've been asked this many times, I might as well put it out there. Do I think the president could do a little bit more healing? There are times where I believe, because I've met him multiple times, I've been around him. I've had my picture with him. I fundraise for him. When I get to meet him and talk to him, he's the most amazing, compassionate person. Even if it's 2 or 3 minutes that I get, 2 or 3 minutes, right? That's not always what you see on television. What you see is the fighter, the guy that you want on your side if anything is going wrong. There are times where I think his speech when he was at Mount Rushmore, I thought it was amazing. But the funny part about it is CNN had interviewed Bernie Sanders 4 years ago there, and they thought it was amazing, magical, mystical. But when Trump did it, he was sitting below two presidents that had formerly owned slaves. And why didn't that come up in 2016? It came up because there is this, I believe, false representation that this president does not support all people. I've never once, in the entire time that I've been involved in this campaign, from start to now, I've never once witnessed any prejudice towards me as an openly gay man. I know other gay people that work on the campaign, but I will tell you, there's members of the LGBT community that are convinced that he is against them. I've never seen him be mean or nasty to a Black person or Asian person or Hispanic person, but I can tell you there's a narrative out there that he does not support them. You know, what I tend to focus on in my life, and I hope it's in your life and all lives, all of us are, we just want to be able to, you know, be able to go out to dinner, have a nice job, have a nice place to live. You know, most people don't get as involved as you and I are, Mellissa, in politics. I wake up every day, and I think it's sometimes, I call it a sickness, if you wanted the truth, because it's like I wake up and I'm not like looking at social media for the reasons that other people am. Sometimes I'm looking at it like, okay, where are we going today? Well, what happened while I was asleep for 8 hours? You know, what is it? And I think that that's where we got to kind of reel it back in a little bit and start realizing that America is a wonderful country. It's amazing. It's the best country in the world. We're so lucky. And I think Republicans specifically, and back to why I'm being interviewed today regarding my running for this position, we have a responsibility for people to look at the Republican Party differently, as a party that is inclusive. You know, because then overall, when I go to Trump rallies, I've been to Trump rallies all over the country, probably close to over 100 at this point. I have been interviewed background checked by the Secret Service over 20-something times. I'm not the enemy of any of the folks that sometimes come in my direction. Mellissa, you know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of them. The fact of the matter is we can do better. And that's why I'm running for this role, because I believe that Republicans and Democrats and independents in this town deserve a little better than what they're getting. They deserve a lot better than what they're getting, because not only is the country not as broken as many of them would like us to believe, but this county is not as broken, or this city is not as broken. We really are. We live in one of the best places in the world in Orlando. And I'm hoping we can get back to normal, whatever that is. You know, maybe people do wash their hands more than they used to. Maybe, you know, there's a lot of things that we do better. Maybe we automatically social distance. Who knows how that, you know, some of these steps. God puts us in a place for a reason. I've always believed that, you know, he never gives you more than, you know, you can take, or, you know, in our case, a country can take or a city can take. But we are testing more. And as a result of testing more, we are going to see more results. And I think that's one of the reasons that we've just got to recognize sometimes that we may have to do the simple things like send kids back to school and go back to work, because at some point you got to do what's necessary to keep this country going forward. So that, I mean, I think that in a nutshell is, you know, my reason for obviously running, it's so many, but more importantly, it's to try to change the face of the Republican Party in Orange County. And I believe I've illustrated in 27 years that when I go to task on something, I'm going to achieve that goal. And you do it by uniting and bringing people together. And I think I've illustrated I can do that.
Very well said. Another mouthful, like perfect talking points. Perfect talking points. I love it.
Okay, what questions am I going to ask Randy? Well, I guess I don't have to ask any because he's in.
Well, this is the beauty of preparation. And ladies and gentlemen, that's always the catchphrase, the separations in the preparation. So we're gonna take another commercial break and kind of get into the more personal side of Randy. You've already, you know, been pretty transparent about that, but kind of blend the politics into just who Randy Ross is as a person. So we'll be right back and kind of get a little more into that. Stay tuned, guys.
It takes experience to know the difference in property values. For example, this business is not the same as this business. And this house is definitely not the same as this house. And this, well, this is definitely not the same as this. And that's why it's important to have someone who understands true property appraisals to help our community grow, while making sure everyone pays their fair share. Because experience matters. Re-elect Rick Singh for Orange County Property Appraiser.
All right, guys, we are back with Randy
I
Ross.
love
So,
this platform that you're using. I like all these
yeah.
commercials and all. That's great.
Absolutely. Yeah, we had to pivot, you know what I mean? COVID-19 happened and we still had to keep the content coming. So we adapted like many of the other media outlets out there. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Good.
So yeah, we wanted to, talk a little bit more about you as the person. So I mean, what motivates you and keeps you going? You've watched our politics interviews, and we ask every guest this. What keeps you going on the more difficult days, on the more stressful days, whether it's, stuff you're hearing about, what's going on with the president, whether there's stuff going on locally, maybe there's a project you're trying to get done and you're getting a lot of pushback, or even the health stuff now that we're in the midst of the pandemic. What is the thing that keeps you going?
I think faith and family is number one. I've taken care of my mom for about 25 years. And so that is a real learning. My mom recently had a hip replacement, and I got to witness firsthand how tragically the rehab process is, putting a family member in a nursing home. I would show up there randomly, just to keep an eye on how they were handling things. So I've talked to a number of legislators, and I really believe Betty's bill, which is my code word for it, but there needs to be some revisiting of healthcare when it comes to seniors that are in facilities. That's a big priority to me. I won't be able to do much in this role probably, other than being able to have access to elected officials that probably could maybe take this on as their own platform. I had a conversation last night with an amazing lady who's really involved in trying to reduce child trafficking. One of the wonderful parts about being in this role for the last 5 years or being somewhat in a role one way or the other, is that I get to meet some amazing people. People from all levels economically, people, that have passion points, people that, really want to see the country do better. And the funny part about it is, even when I talk to Democrats, there are many Democrats, when we have real conversations, they like a lot of what this president's done. I think that to me is an opportunity that we get to see sometimes, that there are places where we agree. You got to remember that I'm a Republican that was appointed to the Membership Mission and Review Board by a Democrat commissioner. I think that sends a message. And listen, I don't always appoint to those boards. I'm part of a process where there's going to be some Democrats that become part of those opportunities. Certainly, I want to see more conservatives get in there, but that's not my job. The job is about qualifications. So you have the right qualifications for that. And, this particular commissioner, she took a huge hit when she appointed me to that. But I think in the end, what she's learned is that I'm fair. Hopefully I'm reasonable. Something happens when you get to a certain age, and I've already told you my age, but you get to a certain point where you look at things a lot differently. The lens is different. The Randy Ross 10 years ago would not have been prepared to run the Trump campaign in 2016. I was a little bit too anxious. I would have maybe said some things that I shouldn't have said, done things that I shouldn't have done, because I was just so fired up, This came to me at the right time in my life. 2015, and I've made this very public, was not the best year for me in the beginning. And so I'd been in a 5-year relationship, and that relationship had ended, and some things had happened. And, one day I got a call or an email. I can't remember how it came to me. They're looking for chairman. You should apply for this. And the funny part about it is, a lot of people don't realize I had applied for The Apprentice. I'd actually gone and gone through the audition process. I didn't get it because I guess I didn't get excited enough. But the irony of that happening 10 years ago or 15, whenever it was, out at Universal Orlando is actually where the audition was. And then somewhere down the line coming to become part of his team. That's pretty amazing. And I said it earlier, and I'll say it again. It's always been comforting. I remember the first time I met the president. It was at the rally that we did at the University of Central Florida. And we had all together. Now, I've never done it. I mean, I've done stuff like large events, but I'd ever put a presidential, at that time he's a candidate. And I remember they said to us, you're going to get your picture with him. So we go backstage, and there's a line of people that at that point, a lot of people were getting their pictures. Today, I would be surprised if anybody still can, based on the virus and the protections that are around the president. But I remember, and he looked me in the eyes, and he goes, when he found out who I was, and he goes, so tell me, how are we really doing in Florida? And I was like, I didn't know exactly what, I said something. I know I said something, but the 4 other times since then that I've had the opportunity to have my picture with him based on fundraising objectives, when he's asked that question, and he always does, I'm always prepared for an answer. And sometimes I've told him, we've got some work to do. We've got some things that aren't going quite the way we need them to go. And he'll look to someone on his staff and say, follow up about that. I've also, had the wonderful opportunity to sit down with Brad Parscale, who is his campaign manager, before. The overall, we couldn't be any more prepared going into the 2020 election than I think we are. I see the same level of energy and enthusiasm from volunteers and supporters, not just of course here in Orange County, but all over the country. What we have is a situation like George Bush had when he was running for his second term. We've got an economy that is not perfect. We've got this pandemic that is still looming over our country. And so we have to make a decision. Do we want to trust Trump to take us over the finish line with this pandemic? Or are we going to give that to to Biden? And I don't talk negatively about Democrats. I've never done that because I just don't think it's going to get me anywhere. But in this case, I believe we need to continue the ship forward and see how we get down the line and get to the point of success. And success means that we get the unemployment rate back to where it was. We get focused. What are we not hearing about anymore? We're not even hearing about immigration, because people are kind of obsessed right now, or compulsively obsessed, I would say, with talking about the pandemic. And that's because I think in some cases the media is keeping that ball rolling. Every day there's either a press conference from the governor, there's something here, breaking news, talking about the stats, talking about this. As a regular person, I can't even imagine how most people are processing it. I know many people are just turning their televisions off or saying that they've had enough. I'm not a blind follower. I know there are times where we could do things differently, and I include the president in that. But for the most part, I'm 99% sure I made the right decision to support him, and I'm 99.9% sure he's the right decision for 2020.
Gotcha. That was an interesting blend. I did want to ask you, given your history as a community organizer, just for our audience, just so they learn a little bit more about you and your history, what is a favorite community event for you that you were able to organize?
I think Walk a Mile in Her Shoes for Harbor House. I'd done many things. I led the largest AIDS Walk team at the point that we raised $20,000 for AIDS Walk back in 2010, because I had a friend that had died of HIV. So I kind of felt this obligation, and it turned into this wonderful gift. I never thought, that I would do something like that, and it was amazing. We had over 100 people on the team, raised a lot of money. It was great. We called the Real Biatches of Orlando. The Title I schoolwork back in the 90s, working with the mayor's office a year after I moved to Orlando for Intercity Games Orlando, going into economically depressed areas like Washington Shores and Rock Lake, and working with all these kids, because we all know that health and wellness is really not cheap. You've got to be able to afford to go to a gym. You got to be able to afford to eat right. And so Cardio Express, which was my program, was a way of targeting Title I schools, which kids that are free reduced lunches, so that we could actually kind of say there are ways around that, and bring awareness to that. But there's no doubt, as a domestic abuse survivor, that working, in same-sex domestic abuse, it's out there, it happens. The very first relationship that I was in formally when I came out at 36 years old was not a good one. And when I decided to do this, Walk a Mile in Her Shoes was one way. They had tried it. I think they did a small event at UCF, and I think maybe 20 people showed up. But I don't do things small. If I take it on, I'm going to make it huge. And so when I did the first Walk a Mile, engaging all these different groups, it was really in the back of my head. And I finally did, prior to the event, gosh, it was a hot day in June, but I came out and wrote an article about my experience. And I still, to this day, every once in a while will broadcast it out there, because I want people to understand being a victim of domestic abuse is one thing. Being an activist and survivor is a totally different thing. We all have that power. I didn't know the signs. Somebody was paying attention to me. I thought it made a lot of sense, but we all know that the honeymoon phase and relationship is somewhat over after 3 months. And that's when you get to really start seeing who the real person is. And unfortunately, sometimes you're already in love with that person by that time. And so you think you deserve the abuse, whether it be verbal or physical. One of the things I hope for men and women is that they recognize that it's okay to seek help and guidance. I don't know how sometimes I don't know how I survived it, because it was so bad. I think that, the person that I was with really would have preferred that I was gone if they were going to be gone. And so I think that now what I do is I choose friendships. I choose relationships very differently. My core is so small, people that I truly trust. Because in politics, and this is important because I've learned this the hard way, in politics, I don't think you have friends. I think you have acquaintances. You have folks that you might have something that you agree with, whether it be a candidate or a philosophy or a platform issue. But in politics, what we learn is that people are always looking to just figure out a way to either ride your coattails, or they're trying to figure out a way to up themselves one. And that's not real. What's real is what happens on November 4th. Win or lose, who will my friends be on November 4th and further? Those are the relationships that I think people need to really think about. I know many people in the last 4 years, and Mellissa, I'm sure you do as well as our listeners, is that they've lost friends because of politics. And that to me is a real, when I first announced on social media my role, I realized how many haters I had on my page, because they were furious with me. And I eventually had to clean that up greatly. So my personal social media pages, you're not going to find a lot of opportunity to bash me with Trump. There's political pages for that. There's other opportunities for that. And we've all had to kind of, change. When I got on Facebook in 2008, it was kind of forbidden to be mean to people. It was kind of, we didn't really talk about politics. But by 2012, the window had opened. When Obama was running for re-election, I remember how nasty it got. And it was a big learning for me. I think it was my springboard to get back inside of the process and say, I don't understand this. Why are we so mad at each other? Why are we so hateful towards each other? So anyway, I think that when it's all said and done, it's all worked out. You get to a certain age, as I've talked about a couple times on the show, and this is a big one for me. You get to a certain age where things don't bother you as much like they used to. You still have fight in you. I'm fortunate that I still have ambition and a desire to make a difference, because this is not going to be an easy journey. My decision to get in this race, assuming that I'm successful, will put me up against some of the very people that really wanted me out of the party. The only difference is that I will have a louder voice to be able to make the changes that I feel are important to move the local party forward. It's not about going against independents and Democrats. It's about improving what is really weak in this town right now, and that is conservative leadership.
Perfect way to wrap it up. That was like the mic drop moment, because we are right at 2:00. So thank you so much for being on the show, Randy. We appreciate you as always.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And guys, for those of you who have been watching this and probably had no idea what the role is that Randy's running for, hopefully this show has helped to kind of educate you on the role. Although, as you shared, Randy's kind of open. Like, there are a few requirements, but it's relatively open. But yeah, thank you, all of you, for watching. And Randy, thank you for being on. As always, we welcome you back on the show at a future date. So thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you, Mellissa.
to be on the show.
Say hi,
No
Willie.
problem.
Say hi, Willie.
Absolutely. Will do. All right. Enjoy
Talk
the
to
rest of
you.
your time out there. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Yep. All right, guys. So that does it for us here at the FNN Politics and Power series. That is it for the week. I will be back on Tuesday with another guest. Of course, we will be back on 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday with the next episode. And you'll see me again this afternoon for the evening news rundown. That is at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And a quick programming note, our lovely Jamesia Stoudemire won't be joining us today for the Entertainment 444, even though it is Thursday. She is on the move, so we will see and hear her lovely voice and see her lovely face tomorrow. She'll be joining me on the evening news rundown tomorrow. And speaking of tomorrow is Friday, so it is the jam-packed day here for the National News. So Jenny Rosario de Casiano will be back with the Entertainment Buzz, and she will be interviewing Jordan Woods Robinson, one of the Blue Men, actually, as part of the Blue Man Group here in Orlando. So she'll be able to have that interview. You guys will be able to hear his journey, not only as an actor, but as part of the Blue Man Group, and maybe even get his thoughts on the reopening of Universal and see how that experience has been for him. But in the meantime, guys, have a great rest of your afternoon until I see you again at 5 p.m. Take care. Have a great day.